So AngularJS and other frameworks like it have come into being to solve some problems. Some sticky situations when it comes to modern web development. We're trying to make web software and websites feel more natural, feel more fluid. And we're trying to lower the amount of work that's necessary to build a really good web application. So what are the kind of problems that AngularJS is trying to solve in the first place? And knowing that will help you understand how it works and how it accomplishes solving those problems. All right, so let's look at some example code. I'm going to use brackets for the rest of this course as my code editor. If you've never heard of brackets or don't have it, you can go to brackets.io. It's free, it's created by Adobe, and it's focused on web development. You can download it for Mac, for Linux, or for Windows. So I'll open up brackets, and we're going to look at a quick example. What's nice about brackets is I can just open a folder. I've got one already on my desktop just to show you this example. And once I have the code in this folder opened, I can just hit this live preview button in the upper right corner, and it pops open the site that I have open in my browser running locally in a little web server. So I can just hit this button and run this site as if it was sitting on the internet. So that's what we're going to do from now on. We'll open in brackets and use live preview to look at the running site. Now that said, what's our little example? Well, also for the rest of this course, I'll be using Bootstrap. If you've been using Bootstrap before, it'll be familiar. If you haven't, it's just some CSS that's pre-made for you, essentially. You can go to getbootstrap.com and find classes that you can add to your HTML, CSS classes that will pretty things up, make things look better. So all of the stuff we'll build, I'm going to use Bootstrap to make it a little bit easier. So here I've got a quick little site. I've got some HTML, I've got Bootstrap and jQuery. Also, for everything I'll be doing in this course, I'm going to increase the font size just a little bit from standard Bootstrap, just to make things a little bit easier for you to see. Now that said, here's what I actually have in this little application. I've got a couple of buttons called Step 1 and Step 2, and a couple of panels that contain some information for each of those steps. I'll go ahead and go to the live preview. You can see what happens. A little web server starts. So I've got two buttons, Step 1, Step 2. I click Step 1, I get the Step 1 panel. Click Step 2, I get the Step 2 panel. Pretty simple conceptually. Now you've probably written something like this before. It's assumed that you have a little bit of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript experience if you're coming to this course. And perhaps you've written some jQuery. So you've probably written some code that looks like this, at least at some point. Let's look at the code. So I've got some jQuery code. I've got a variable which is my current step. I start off by hiding those two panels. Remember, they have their IDs, so I have to know what their IDs are. I hide them. And then those two buttons, I have to handle the click event of those buttons. And so when those buttons are clicked, again, I have to know the ID. I hide one of the panels and I show the other. And I update a variable in the JavaScript, and then probably I'd go off and update the database or something so that I know what step the user's on. And for Step 2, I have to do the same thing, just the other way around. Hide Step 1, show Step 2, set a variable, update the database maybe. Now this doesn't look that bad, but imagine if this had 20 steps, or if there was other complex logic that was involved. The problem is that you spend a lot of time updating the document object model, or the DOM. Now you probably know what that is. If you don't, it's basically the representation of the HTML that sits inside the browser's memory. That's a way for us to manipulate the HTML in code, and also to read it and see what all of the HTML on the page is, its attributes and various values. So we're manipulating the DOM here. We're hiding and showing these panels, and we're responding to events, and we're updating variables in the JavaScript. We're doing a lot of management ourselves. And after a while, this gets really hairy. It gets really difficult to deal with. And it can become just overwhelming. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could just update one side and the other side updated automatically? Update the HTML and the JavaScript updates. Update the JavaScript and the HTML updates. That's the basic idea that's behind the various frameworks that, like AngularJS, have become popular. We'll get more into that, but here's the problem we're trying to solve. This complexity of managing both the DOM, the document object model, the HTML, and all of the logic and the variables, the data, and we have to do all of that manually. So this is one of the big problems that AngularJS is solving, along with some others. So let's get into how these problems are going to be solved and what are some of the basic concepts that AngularJS uses to solve them.